Thanks for those of you who've been prompt. I know you're there. I'm just going to give it a minute or two for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. But thanks for being on time. Yeah, I'm literally going to give it another 30 seconds or so. I'm a fan of being punctual, so thank you for those who are, and then we'll get started. Right. Okay. Well, that's great. There are some more people on the line now, so thank you for that. Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. This is the first skills webinar we're running under the Supply Wandsworth Business Support Program. So we'll tell you more about what else is happening, and hopefully some of you were at the launch event last week. Just to let you know, this is an interactive session to an extent. I'm going to do most of the work, but you can do some of the work as well. And the reason for that is that I want you to get as much out of this session as possible. It's all well and good. You can sit here and listen to me for an hour and you'll pick some stuff up. But what I would ask you to do is commit to doing something, commit to take some action as a result of spending an hour of your precious time listening to me and what I've got to say. So I might ask you for what that one action is at the end. If you've got any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll either answer them as we go through, or alternatively, we'll have some time at the end. Yeah, let's get started. So just a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm going to now try and condense 40 years into 40 seconds. So time is obviously flying. I must be having fun because it's going far too quickly. So 30 years in banking for my sins. And on a serious note, much of that involved managing large contracts for the government sector within Lloyd's. So that was renewal tenders, new tenders for local authorities, and also for central government departments. So that's where my knowledge of tendering and bidding comes from. I'm a member of Brandon Business Support Group, and we're running the program on behalf of Wandsworth Council, and I'll tell you a little bit about us in a moment. I've worked on a number of these sort of programs and delivered probably 200 one-to-one sessions over the last 2 or 3 years. So I've got a reasonable amount of experience. And I also run my own businesses, so I've got some practical experience as well as a theoretical experience. I know the sort of challenges that you go through, and as you can see, I also have a small social care business, which is good for my heart, so I just help some old people locally. So it's a balance of intellectual stimulation and sort of heartwarming stimulation. So that's my 40 odd years in 40 seconds, give or take. Okay, so like I said, these are interactive sessions. So we've got this first one today and a second follow-up one I'm running at the same time, same place next week. There are a further 2, but I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a moment. I'm just going to focus on these 2 for now. So like it says on the screen, this is all about excellence in selling and best practice. What I hear from some SMEs is they treat the bidding and tendering process as an administrative exercise. And yes, there's an element of admin in bidding and tendering, of course, but if you treat it as an administrative exercise solely, you're more likely to fail. So I'll show you basically how to work beyond that. So what are we going to cover? We've got a fairly packed agenda this morning. We'll look at what the key elements are that make up a winning bid. We'll look at things like why organisations go out to tender, the sort of things they're looking for. I've talked about getting the basics right. That's the admin stuff, which essentially you've got to get right to get through to the next sort of stage, to make that shortlist. We'll look at what makes up a winning bid, supported by what I like to call the golden rules. And it will cover things like understanding the key questions and objectives, making sure you confirm your solutions and the selling points, talking about benefits, not features, how to back it up with evidence so it proves that what you're saying is true. We'll spend some time on research, which is critically important. And the final thing we'll look at is how to write a clear and concise bid response. So we'll do that over the course of these 2 sessions. So a little bit about Branduin. We're a leading group of business advisors in London and the South East, and essentially we deliver these sort of programs on behalf of councils and chambers of commerce. And as it says, we consult with various business support organisations, we deliver these programs, and then we work closely with entrepreneurs and business owners like yourselves, both in the UK and probably to a lesser extent overseas. This is a slide that we're very proud of. It's taken us the best part of 12 years to produce. That's nothing to do with my poor PowerPoint skills, but it's essentially showing you the organisations that we work with. And you can see that there's quite a strong government focus there, but also some business support groups, including, of course, Wandsworth Council. We run a number of programs. I'm not going to go through them all for you. This is our Fit to Bid program. We run a very successful Women in Business program. And as you can see, there are other things that we can support you with as a business. Whether you're a startup, whether you're trying to grow, or whether you're at the sort of entrepreneurial stage, shall we say. And these are just some of the programs we've run over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. And there are a variety of different programs. I've worked on, I think, 7 out of those 9 programs, so I'm fairly familiar with the process and fairly experienced. But we've got a reasonably good track record. And the reason I tell you that is because that's important for you guys as well later as we go through the tendering process. So let me start by sharing some of the key issues that SMEs tell me and colleagues of mine they face when bidding and tendering. And as I said, these are real feedback issues from businesses just like yours. They're not picked off the internet. I won't go through the whole list, but essentially they talk about, particularly in the public sector, they haven't got enough experience of the public sector, and the industry is dominated by large players. It's harder for smaller SMEs to break in. You're not known to public sector buyers. You can't get hold of the right people. They're all too busy. They don't answer your phone call. They don't respond to emails. Sometimes there's a lack of proactive marketing strategy, which I find businesses have, and perhaps they haven't got enough testimonials, reviews, they haven't got the time to plan properly. This point is a key one. Obviously, they just don't really understand the tendering process, which can be a little bit detailed. But what I'll do in these next 2 sessions is demystify it for you as best as I can. And they've got limited experience in developing and writing strong bids, and they're not sure what to put into their bid submission to make it a winning one. So these are real issues that SMEs share with us. And what I'll try and do is show you how you can break down and deal with all those issues to give you the best chance of winning tenders. And the little diagram in the corner just shows the process literally from the pre-qualification stage right through to contract award. And we'll talk more about that in detail later. So this slide might be familiar to you if you were at the launch event last week. Just a little bit about the program. It is a great program. I would say that, of course, but it is. It's quite condensed. This is phase 1 of a 2-phase program with the council. So the first thing we'll do under the program is we'll show you how to engage with procurement departments, because certainly very often, in fact, almost always with the public sector, you'll be dealing with a procurement department. You won't be dealing with the end user. In the private sector, a little bit different. You might be dealing directly with the end user. The other thing we have what's called an online bid capability assessment questionnaire. It's something that you can fill out. I think it takes about 10 or 15 minutes. And what it will do is it will give you a report that we'll generate for you to show your state of preparedness for bidding and tendering. So it'll give you an idea of where you need to focus in terms of getting yourself up to speed with bidding and tendering. Of course, we'll show you how to improve your bidding skills. And like I said earlier, it's a sales process. So we'll show you how to sell yourself, whether it's yourself, your business, your products, your service, the benefits. We'll show you how to do that, because that will allow you to score more highly when your tender submission is being evaluated. We're also running a Meet the Buyer event, which I'll talk more about. That's going to be in November down in Tooting Works. And as part of phase 2 of the program in 2024, you'll be eligible for free, fully funded one-to-one tender advice sessions with specialists like myself. So that's coming next year. So there's a lot of support in terms of the program, and you have to basically just devote the time. That's how it works. So here are some of the benefits. As I say, I won't read every single one out, but you're competent in reading. But like, we'll assess your bid writing skills. We'll share tips and best practice with you. This is not about just theoretical information. It's about what I hear, what businesses tell me they're struggling with when they're trying to submit successful tenders. Like I said, there'll be some meet the buyer events. We have the one-to-one sessions. We'll help you get to a point where you can submit an expression of interest. It may be a term you're familiar with. It's a document that shows the council you're interested in bidding for some piece of business. We'll support you, of course, with your writing and submitting bids. And something you may have come across is called the Business Model Canvas. And it's a very good one-page tool way of analysing your business. And we'll look at that from the perspective of your tender. We'll also talk about a term called value proposition. What value are you adding in terms of your bid, and how to articulate that clearly? And you'll have support throughout the program and regular feedback. So it's not as if we just see you on these sessions and then never see you again. You can talk to us in between. So there is lots of good stuff as part of the program. So just throw yourself into it. I tend to feel in life that the more you put into something, the more you get out. So throw yourself into this thing, and then you'll certainly pick up a lot of useful information and tips to help you win more bids and tenders. Right, so first question for you, ladies and gentlemen, is did you or would you have considered bidding for getting involved in that contracting program? I'm sure it's a picture that's familiar to all of you. And the point I want to make there is, typically, and I'm generalizing here, I accept that, smaller businesses might think there's no way we can get involved in a program like that. Well, what I will try and show you over the next couple of sessions is that with the right process, the right systems, the right planning, perhaps the right partners, there's no reason why smaller local businesses like yourself can't get involved in these larger contracts. So don't be frightened by things that feel like they're too big, because with the right planning, the right systems, you can get involved in those larger bids. Okay, so first exercise for you to do, it's a very easy one, nothing too taxing. I just want to get a flavour for what your tendering and bidding experience is. So if you can just click on the chat and put in the following. If you've never tendered before, just put a 1 in if you would. If you've completed a few tenders, it's a 2. And if you regularly submit bids and tenders, it's a 3. If you're a 2 or a 3, what's your level of success? So I'll just give you 30 seconds or so to do that. It just helps me understand where you are in terms of the process. Okay, so we've got a range. Kenaz, thanks. You've got a lot of experience. So for someone like Kenaz, you regularly submit bids and tenders. How successful are you? So 2 and 3, yeah, okay. Okay, so we've got a mixture. I'll just give it another 30 seconds for everyone to. Okay, you've been successful at some, Carla. That's great. That's great. Some people have had no experience before. Okay, never yet. Okay, okay, Cameron, never successful. Okay, well, let's hopefully help you break that cycle. Okay, that's great, Julia. Okay, fantastic. So we've got quite a range of experience on the session. So that's good. It's good. It's some with limited experience and knowledge, and some who've been quite successful. So thanks for that. So second exercise I want you to think about, and this does take a bit more thinking. And like I said, the more you put in, the more you get out. I want you to spend just a minute or two thinking about, why do organisations go out to tender? Because it takes a lot of time and effort on all sides, clearly on your side as a supplier, but also for the client. So why do they put themselves through this process? So as part of that process, and you'll hear this regularly throughout the session, is try putting yourself in the mind of the buyer. Because if you can do that, you'll start to write your bid from their perspective, and it'll be much more powerful. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for that. So just put some information in the chat, if you would. Why do organisations go out and tender? And what do you think they're looking for in terms of the supplier? So a minute for you to think and pop something in the chat on that. Don't be shy. There are, The more you put in, the more you're going to get out of this. So whatever you think, we'll talk about it later. And then I'll share, of course, the answers, or some of the answers, shall we say. Looking very blank on the chat screen at the moment, guys and girls. Oh, someone's kicked off. Thank you very much. Excellent. Always. Yeah. So upscaling the business. Yeah. 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 That's fair enough, Kenneth. You mean upscaling your business? Yes, that's an excellent one, Julia. Gold star for you. Yes. Yes. Also another very good one. Yeah. 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 So some of you clearly know how the process works, because you're absolutely right in terms of being transparent, in terms of legislative requirements. They are all key issues why certainly public sector organisations have to go out to tender over a certain size. So I'll just give you 10 seconds more if anyone wants to add anything to that. But there's some great points in that. So thank you for that. Okay, so let me share some of the things that I come across and the things we share. So you got this one, fantastic. Yeah, they want to ensure they have a fair and objective comparison in terms of what's out in the market. The other thing they want to do is by going out to the market, by asking generic questions of every supplier, they should, in theory, minimize the risk in terms of selecting a supplier, because they've gone through a thorough, detailed process. Third point, yes, you got that earlier. There are going to be some legal requirements as to why they have to go out to tender. They have to comply with certain policies. Point four is quite a key point. Achieve a sustainably competitive price. Perhaps more so for people who haven't tendered before. There's a perception in the market that lowest price wins. And let me tell you that that is generally not true. I'll go into detail about pricing versus quality weightings later, but essentially it's not a case of cheapest wins. They want to get value for money. They want to make sure that they're getting good value and they're prepared to pay for it in a number of situations. And all this forms part of the evaluation process. Of course, they want to deliver a return on investment. They want to get value for money. And every organization, public or private sector, wants to deliver efficiencies. How are you going to improve a process? How are you going to save money? How are you going to save time? And preferably, if you can measure that or demonstrate a way of measuring that, it's much, much more powerful. So you got some of those, so that was fantastic. So here are some other factors to consider. And one of the key things is try to get into their mindset. Do you have, as a supplier, an innovative mindset? Do you have ways of demonstrating that you can do things differently? You can drive higher value throughout their organization. They'll also want to make sure that you're able to carry out the work. What is your level of competence? How do you prove that you can do what you say? How can you evidence that? How can you show you can improve services? Collaborative working, communications. And the fourth point is also important. They want to find a partner, a supplier that fits them culturally. Even though these may be larger organizations, ultimately people want to work with people that they like and who have a sort of similar mindset, I suppose, in some ways, in terms of their values and beliefs. So that's quite important as well. I'll show you how you can find that. Do you provide real-time, easy, user-friendly management information that helps their organization? Have you got a feel? Have you got a view and an understanding of what's their future strategy? That's what the future focus expertise point relates to. So it's all well and good responding to a tender now, that's fine. But do you know from your research, and I'll show you and talk to you about that later, how and what they're thinking about doing perhaps 18, 24 months down the line? What's their longer term vision? So can you become a strategic partner rather than just perhaps a supplier for a one-off service? Are you transparent and open in terms of your communication? Are you prepared to take responsibility and be accountable when things go wrong? Because we all know in business, things go wrong, but how you sort it out, that can make a massive difference. Do you have a problem-solving mindset? Can you find ways of doing things better? Can you sort out a problem that the client has? And finally, ensuring satisfaction of the internal customer. And what I mean by that is that, like I said earlier, you're often dealing with a procurement department and there'll be a bunch of people whose it's not their full-time job to do this, but they'll be evaluating the tender responses on behalf of the end user, whether that's within the council, in a private sector organisation. So as you can see, there are a number of reasons that companies, that local authorities will go out to tender. And the more you understand those, the better and stronger position you'll be in when submitting your tender response. So lots to think about, but my view is with this, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it well and properly. Otherwise, why bother? So I talked about the basics, the admin part of it. You have to basically cross this bridge, shall we say. You've got to go through this process, but you've got to go through it thoroughly. And it's not enough to win the tender, but if you don't do it properly, you can be kicked out of the process at the first hurdle, and that's obviously something you want to avoid. So there'll often be a supplier questionnaire. It'll ask sort of fairly straightforward questions about you, your company, your organisation, how long you've been going, all that sort of stuff. Okay, you still have to tick all those boxes. There'll often be a form of tender to say you've read everything and you agree with the terms and conditions. In the public sector particularly, there may be what's called a non-collusion certificate, which says that essentially you produced your bid independently. Be conscious also of the terminology. You may have come across some of these terms. It can be a bit confusing. I'll break that down in our second session, but there'll be terminology like invitation to tender, request for information, request for proposal, pre-qualification questionnaire. It can be a little bit confusing, so just make sure you know what it is you're completing. They'll often ask you for a copy of sort of 2 or 3 years accounts or some financials. They'll ask typically for 3 references. This sounds basic, but tell your references that you provided in advance, that you've given them as a referee for a bit of business, so they know to expect some contact from the council, from the organisation. You might be asked what sort of policies you have in place, what sort of level of insurance do you have certain policies in place, and there's nothing to stop you getting those policies in place now, whether that's something called like the social value policy. I'm sure you've come across that term. It might be a health and safety policy, anti-slavery. If you know what sort of policies, for example, councils require up front, get those policies in place. They don't have to be 20-page documents. It can be a 1-page summary, but you've got to have those policies in place. So don't wait till you submit a tender to think, oh, wow, we haven't got a policy for social value. We better think about that. Do it now, before, and then you're going to be in a much stronger position. There'll often always be a pricing template to complete, and make sure you plan and allow sufficient time. But like I say, this is the admin bit. So all your competition, all your competitors will be doing this. And the question is, how do you move on from this basic information to writing a winning bid? Oh, thanks, Roderick. Roderick's put a link in the chat, which is quite useful. So have a look at that in terms of policies. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. So, as I said, now for the real writing. Let's just touch briefly on planning. The bid writing process takes time. Without going into too much detail, I know from my banking days, they were quite complex tenders. It could take, 2 months from start to finish. I'm not suggesting they'll be as complex necessarily for what you're submitting, but the point I'm making is allow sufficient time and project manage it, as I say. So even if it's something like have a simple spreadsheet so that you know what the timings are, what the goals are, what the milestones, what dates are in place. Think about who's on your team, who could help you. If it's just you, okay, you're going to be having to deal with everything. But there may be other resources you can have. Think about the stakeholders that are involved, both internally and externally, and definitely know the deadlines. And that bit I put at the end is so true. Always work to a day before the deadline. So if you've got a response that has to be in by the 31st of October, work to the 30th, because I guarantee you'll run out of time. I've had so many local authorities tell me that, they've got a midday deadline for a tender response, and they're getting calls from potential suppliers at 5 to saying, we can't get into the system, or, we haven't quite finished. Can we have 20 minutes? One thing you'll find with local authorities is, rightly or wrongly, is they will stick to the rules. So don't fall foul of a deadline by not planning properly. And like I say, make sure someone other than the person who's written the tender response reads it over before you send it. Not just for errors and omissions, but potentially to make sure it flows, you've answered the questions thoroughly. So lots of things to think about, to plan properly to give you that better chance of winning. So let's talk about the elements of a winning bid. So it's a combination, in my view, of the right price, like I said, not the cheapest price, and what I call golden rules. So the sort of things we will touch upon, not touch upon, we'll talk about in detail. Directly answering the question according to the evaluation criteria. I'll explain more about that in a minute. Making sure you've got a broader understanding of the organization's needs and objectives. What's their strategy? What's their longer term thinking? Demonstrating you can do what you say you do and it sounds credible. Does it sound reasonable? Is it a competent solution that you can deliver? Have you talked about benefits? It's so tempting to talk about features, and you have to articulate the benefits. Again, we'll talk more in detail about that. Can you back it up with evidence? How do you convince the customer that what you're saying is true? And the final one is writing a clear, concise response, which is a competitive advantage. Writing something that's really crisp, just answers the questions succinctly rather than just putting in lots and lots and lots of information. And these golden rules, they apply to any business, regardless of sector. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to focus on those first two areas, and essentially we'll cover the others in our second session. And my role is to try and give you as many tools, tips, and techniques to help you produce that winning bid. So, first fundamental rule of bidding may sound a statement of the obvious, but excellent bids will usually win contracts. And I'm sure most of you know what's coming next. Poor bids will usually lose contracts. So put in the time and effort to get an excellent bid submission. And I'm going to show you a bit more about that and talk to you a little bit about some of the things that go wrong in bid responses, tender responses. So like I say, sounds obvious, but actually here are just some typical issues I come across when talking to businesses. Not providing a complete answer, not understanding the question properly, not answering all the elements of the question. We'll do an exercise a bit about that in a few moments. This is a classic one, the second one, which is focusing on your business and not the customer. I've been talking about putting yourself in the mindset of the client, because ultimately you know lots about your business and you may think, well, just tell them everything we do and some of it will be relevant and some isn't relevant and that'll do the job. Well, actually, it just makes it harder for the evaluators and they don't have a lot of time, so you won't score as highly. I've touched about, features versus benefits. Always talk about benefits, what it does, how it helps, how it adds value, improves the process, saves money, reduces cost, not the features as in what it is. And evidencing what you're saying. So again, all well and good saying things like, for me, this is a fantastic business support program. How can I prove it? Well, I will prove it after I've got some evidence, I've got some testimonials, and hopefully you've got those as well. So you can start developing all those things in advance. And we'll talk about evidence in our second session. Quick look at the Q&A because there's some stuff coming up. Okay, Natalia, we'll have a think about it separately. There's certainly a lot of information. Natalia just asked about, are there any free resources and templates for completing tenders? There's a whole host of information out on online, and it's just about distilling it down and getting something that works for you. Hopefully, I won't give you templates, but I'll give you a lot of resources in these sessions, which will hopefully help. Okay, I've got one more question. Same question. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, okay. So there's some of the more common errors that are made when submitting bids and tenders. So don't trip up. So here's a fundamental question, and that is, why? Why should they choose you? What's your plan for a great bid, a great tender submission? So think about that for a few seconds. Why should they choose your company? And it's time for the next exercise because I've been doing too much work. So I would like you to do a bit of thinking. And that is basically think about and pop in the chat, why should they choose your company as a supplier? What's different about you versus all the other suppliers out in the market? And how can you show evidence that you've got expertise in services required. So I'll give you a minute for that. So please pop something in the chat. You know how it works now. You've done a wonderful job so far. So thank you very much. And if you do think about it, and we all know that thinking is hard, if you're unable to articulate why they should choose you as a supplier when it's your company, it's going to put yourself in a slightly weaker position, isn't it? And if you've got a strong USP, if you've got a good track record, then you need to just articulate that clearly in your tender submission. So do pop something in the chat if you can. I'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll move on. We've got lots of good stuff to cover. Thank you. Someone has started the ball rolling. That's excellent. Yeah, thanks, Roderick. Yeah, prove a good what we do. Testimonials, case studies, fantastic. Yeah, evidence. Yeah, yeah, redacted documents. Yeah, absolutely fine. Evidence is key. Evidence is critical. We all say how good we are at stuff, and we'd all like to think we are. But it's so much more powerful if your clients say how good you are, what a great job you've done, how you've added value, how you've improved the process. Okay, well, thank you for that. That's useful. But is this enough? Like I said, keep that sort of putting yourself in the mindset of the buyer. So here are just some of the reasons. It's not an exhaustive list, and you've covered some of them, why a potential customer might choose you. First of all, it's like, how well do you know the client? Do you have an existing relationship? With larger organizations, sometimes it's harder to navigate who the right person is, who's the key buyer, who's the decision maker, who are the key stakeholders. We'll help you as part of these meet the buyer sessions and by signposting you to the council, if that's helpful, who the key people are. And it's not rocket science, whether it's a council or whether it's an individual business you're trying to develop a relationship with. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. So do spend time building your relationships. Evidence, yes, we talked about that. The more of that, the better. One of the clients I dealt with, he's got the USP of more 5-star Google reviews than anyone else, and that's great. So evidence, fantastic. And where can they find it? Is it somewhere that's easy for them to find? Because the evaluators, they'll all be checking the bid submissions, and then they'll be looking at the responses and then trying to prove where's the evidence. Can you demonstrate you've got expertise and experience in the sector? Certainly with local authorities, I know from my background, they all talk to each other and it hasn't changed at all. They go to sort of events together. And guess what? If you as a supplier have done a great job in a certain area, they'll tell other local authorities. So have you worked on similar contracts? Can you demonstrate and show how you added value? What's the knowledge and experience within your team? What's your level of resource? So that, as I said, it's not an exhaustive list, but there are a number of reasons why a company might choose you. And like I said earlier, take the time to get certain things in place, like your evidence, your case studies, and your testimonials in advance of submitting your tender. But is that enough? Because your competition, they'll all be talking and claiming these things. So it's all well and good, but you have to turn this generic language into basically sort of a value-driven narrative with evidence, and that'll then help you score the highest mark. Because everything you're doing in your tender submission is trying to demonstrate to the evaluator that they should score you highly. We'll look at the evaluation process so in a few moments. So like I said, another golden rule is basically understanding what you're being asked and the objectives. And that's critical, key to writing a winning bid. And that's somewhat unusual robotic diagram. Again, it is about putting yourself in the mindset of the buyer. So let's have a little look at the objectives and needs of any tender submission request, because there's always going to be a hierarchy to understanding what's important to the client, what they actually want to achieve. So firstly, they'll have some high-level strategic objectives. They'll be their key drivers. That's what the project needs to relate to. There'll be some absolute needs within the project, which we must deliver, perhaps some sub-needs. And then there's what we call added value. It's not a nice to have. It's like, what can you do differently? What is it that they've not thought about? And that's your opportunity as a supplier to make recommendations to show you've got an innovative mindset. You can come up with something that others haven't. Certainly one of the best questions I was asked by a client when we were submitting a tender was, what have we, that they said to me, what have we not thought about in our tender request? So if you can come up with something that they haven't thought about, that's innovative, that's value adding, that's different, that stands you out from your competition. So to give you a practical example, I suppose you might have council looking to source quality catering suppliers for care homes. So that would be your strategic objective, the high level objective. The absolute needs of the project would be to appoint a catering contractor with hopefully some healthy options. And the added value you might be able to demonstrate is like you've got some vegan choices, or the presentation of the food is different. It stands out. You write the nutritional values, the calorie counts, those sort of things. So again, it's all about trying to stand out and differentiate from your competitors. And once you've identified those needs, those requirements, you're on the way to writing a winning bid. So where can you find the information? Well, there's four main areas. First of all, they'll tell us in the invitation to tender. Typically, there's quite a lot of information. So, read the spec carefully. I know in my banking days, when we got the tender request in, it was often quite a thick document. Print it off, and I'd sort of literally go into a room, put a metaphorically cold towel around my head, just go through it and highlight all the key issues, the key things that need to be considered, the timelines, who needed to support me, the stakeholders. So read the spec carefully. You can ask questions, of course, and you'll get answers. But remember that whenever, certainly with local authorities, they're going through a tender process, if you ask a question, they'll share the answer with all the potential suppliers. So don't basically ask anything too sensitive, shall we say. You can carry out research. We're going to talk about that in a bit of detail, because that will definitely improve and increase your understanding of what they want. I can't overplay how important it is to do thorough research. We'll do a session on that in a moment. It will help you get an edge over other potential suppliers. And like I say, you can clarify what they want through the formal Q&A process. So there are four key areas where you can find information. So in terms of scoring, making sure that you identify the key elements of a question and making sure you structure your answer to cover all those areas will put you in a much stronger position when they're evaluating your response. Because you'll certainly, as it says there, you'll score fewer marks. Guess what? If it only partially answers the question. So make sure you answer it thoroughly. And we're going to do an exercise on that just now. So here's a question. It's a question from a real bid. And the question is quite simple to you guys and girls. It's literally, how many elements must our answer address? So how many parts of this question do you need to respond to? So I'll give you a moment to think about that. So you just need to put a number in the chat. There are 3 bullet points, so perhaps it's 3, perhaps it's more, perhaps it's less. So just put a number in, as I say, and then we'll go through and I'll explain what the elements of the question are. So 30 seconds to put your number in. I'll give you a clue, it's probably 3 and above. Yep, I've got a 5, I've got a 4. Any advances on 4 and 5? What anyone think it might be 3? Don't be shy, people. No one's going to embarrass you here. Just whatever number you think is the elements of the question to answer, pop it in the chat. 10 seconds more to give that a go before I reveal the answer. Yeah, thanks, Kenneth. 4, 5. Yep. You're all on the right track, so that's excellent. Well done for that. So essentially, if you look at the wording in blue, and then basically the table at the bottom, you can see there are actually 6 elements to this question. So I think it's always important to make sure you cover each part of the question thoroughly. So even like, for example, question or part 3 says the number of people in each team. You could just say in your response 4, 3, but perhaps go a little bit over and above that to stand out. Maybe a little organogram as an appendix. maybe a 2-line bio on each person. Pictures, you'd be surprised how much difference that makes in terms of making you, as a potential supplier, seem real. Preferably a picture of you smiling. You might think this is like Mickey Mouse stuff, but actually it makes it a bit more real. You know, what resources do you have available? It might not just be people. Just step back and think about, why are they asking these questions, and think carefully about that. Like I say, put yourself in the mindset of the client. Why is it that they're asking you these questions? Because if you can get your head around that, then basically, oh, that's fair enough. So Julia, yeah, Julia, well done, 6, you got that right. Yeah, okay, so it's difficult to put in images in portals. Yeah, okay, and I understand that. I'm sure that's the case. Presumably you could send something in a different sort of unknown technical expert. But no, fair point. Thanks for that feedback. Okay, so you can see at first glance, when you looked at the question, there are 3 bullet points. You might think there are 3 elements of the question to answer. If you did that and didn't sort of break it down more thoroughly, you wouldn't score as highly. So this, again, it sounds obvious, but read the question carefully, think, reflect, cover all the elements. So let's have a quick look at sort of how evaluators score responses. There's no standardized evaluation process. The slide is pretty self-explanatory in a nutshell. You know, if you don't answer the question, then you're going to score very poorly. Of course, what you're always seeking to do is score 4 or 5. And as you can see, with a 5, you know, you have a well-defined solution, you've linked it to the benefits of the client, you batch it up with evidence, and you've quantified, so you can measure and show how you add value. And if you can do that, you'll be in a much, much stronger position. Sometimes in tenders, there'll be a weighting. So what I mean by that is they will tell you up front, for example, that 60% of the scoring will be weighted towards pricing. So you know in that case that they are looking for a keen price and only 40% is on quality, or it might be vice versa. Typically, contracts which are standardized, if I can put it that way. I'm not sure if Sue, you're on the call, but there was, for example, if you have a cleaning company and they are looking for a supplier for a cleaning company, they may want cheapest price on the basis they believe that all cleaning companies can do what they need them to do. So just make sure you see what the weighting is as well. So I touched upon research and how important that is a few moments ago. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes now just to think about that. This is critically important. You can really stand head and shoulders above the competition by doing thorough, proper research. So think about a couple of things. What are your sources of information on a client? And when you're doing that research, what information are you looking for? So again, I'll give you a minute or two to do that. Pop some information in the chat, and then I shall reveal all the answers that I found. Because as a supplier, as a potential supplier, it's important for you to understand the client in greater detail than they provided in the tender. They'll give you the standard information in the tender, but there's much more that you can find by doing your research. So, yeah, someone has got the ball rolling, and it's turning too quickly. Carl, yeah, website, case studies, blogs, yeah, social media, of course, yeah, absolutely, yeah, for sure. Yeah, Google, social media, custom website, yeah, all good stuff. Anyone for any more? That's all very true. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks very much for that. Oh, there's one more. Yeah, research online. Yeah, references on Google. Yeah, that's very good, Julia. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, getting the right person, the right point of contact, that's critical as well. Who's the key decision maker? Who's the person who's doing the sort of buying? Who's the head of procurement? You know, have you got any relationship with them? So yeah, all good stuff. Let me share with you a little bit more information on that. So yes, of course, the company website. So if you were to go to Brandun's website, you'd see information of us, and you can see we've got pictures of us with our cheesy grins. And if you clicked on each picture, there'd be a bit of background and information. So you can find out who are the sort of key people, the key players within an organization. We touched on social media, and depending on what sort of business you're in or what sort of business the supplier is in, there'll be different platforms which are obviously more relevant to them. For us, it tends to be LinkedIn, but we use other platforms as well. So there are a number of different social media platforms and resources which you can use to find out more about the client. So let's look a little bit about Wandsworth in particular. And those of you who are at the launch session last week, you'll have heard Mark Gleister, I think it was, the head of procurement, stand up and say, all the information is out there. It's all on my website. There are all sorts of links. People don't look. People don't look. They just phone him up and ask stuff. He says, well, it's on the website. And the point of doing that is it helps you understand more about the client. It helps you understand what's key to them. What are they sort of challenges at the moment? And what can you reflect in terms of what you found out by researching in terms of your tender? Because again, it demonstrates a better understanding and knowledge of the client. And that gives you an edge. That gives you an edge over someone who's not done any research and has just answered questions. What sort of language do they use? What's challenging in their sort of world, if you like? You know, they've got an organic organization chart. Will tell you who the key people are, how the council is organized, all that good stuff. It takes time, I acknowledge that, but if you're going to do it properly. This is a key bit for anyone wanting to do business with Wandsworth. It talks about how to sell to the council, what's their procurement strategy, you know, basically their local procurement programs, who are the key buyers, who are the influencers, that sort of thing. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of information. Yeah, refer to their strategy documents. Shirin's saying, yeah, that's also good stuff. There is a whole host of information out there. And you just need to basically go out there and find it. Again, Mark put up details of their contract register in Wandsworth at the launch event last week. So that literally is an Excel spreadsheet of every contract, every supply contract they have in place, the size, the value, when it expires, the term. So, you know, if you're looking to bid for work with the council, you know, get yourself registered, obviously, on the portals where they advertise them, but have a look at the contracts register. Have a look at when things are coming up for renewal so you can start planning in advance. As I say, don't leave it till the email comes through on your inbox and you think, oh, right, better start thinking about my tender response. Know in advance that there's something coming up that you can bid for and start planning, get those policies in place, all the things I've touched upon. So there's lots and lots of good stuff out there. They give you their criteria for awarding tenders. Like I think Shirin said earlier, they've invariably got some sort of procurement strategy. There is a whole host of information out there, and it's just a case of going out there and finding it. So that's Wandsworth specifically. More generically, the bid document that has to drive and lead our thinking, of course, but there's also a whole host of other information sources. Excuse me one moment. What are your internal resources? You know, you may have bid for a bit of work with them before. Did you get any feedback? Did people within your organisation know people within the council? Annual report on accounts, websites such as Glassdoor you may have come across where employees give feedback on their employers, and there'll be a whole host of articles, publications, strategy documents. We've touched upon that briefly. Events, conferences you can go to in the private sector. Maybe there'll be credit reference agency reports. You can have a look at sort of government papers. There's a lot of information out there which you can use to help you in terms of your research. In terms of what to look for, I've talked about their strategy. Think about what's their short, medium, and long-term strategy. What's their vision as an organization? What's important to them as an organization? What are the key challenges and issues for them? Because by knowing that, it gives you, as a potential supplier, the opportunity to make a difference. What's changing in their market? What's business critical? What sort of language do they use? Because I was always told in my tendering days, use the same sort of language as the client. So if they use a certain type of terminology, reflect it back in your tender response. It will show that you have a similar sort of mindset in terms of the way you speak, if you like. They'll often have definitions of what constitutes a good supplier. Have a look at that. Make sure you fit the criteria. Are the senior people saying certain things? What's driving them? What's motivating them? The list is not quite endless, but like it says in the bottom right corner, the more you know about your prospect clients in advance, the better, the stronger position you will be in. So there is really a whole host of information. And just plan, like I talked about planning earlier, plan time to do some research, because it really will make a difference in terms of you standing out from all the other potential suppliers. So I've given you a lot of information there, so apologies in one way, but also it shows you that there is a whole host of information out there just waiting for you to find. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about the program. It's quite a condensed program, this bit. As I said, it's phase one in terms of the overall program that we're running for the council. Like I've said, there's the online bid capability questionnaire, which I'd encourage you to complete. We had our launch event last week. Feedback from that was positive. That's good. You got a chance to meet some key people. This webinar that I'm running now is the first of a two-stage webinar program, if you like. This is the introductory one, and then we'll follow up next Tuesday, same place, same time, with the Improve Your Bid webinar. Week after that, I'll be running a webinar on public sector bidding and tendering specifically, because public sector bidding and tendering is different. There is more. I'm a very straight talking person. There is more process, there is more procedure, there's a bit more admin, there's a bit more bureaucracy. But as long as you understand what that process is, as long as you understand what you need to do, then you'll be in a much stronger position. And we'll talk about things like health and well-being, things that are becoming more important in public sector bidding. I've talked about social value as a policy, how do local businesses, local people benefit from the growth of a borough. Every council, including Wandsworth, wants that to happen. They want to use local suppliers. They have this strategy to build what's called community wealth. So they want the local businesses, the local people, to benefit from the good things that are happening in the borough. And then finally, on the 24th, one of my colleagues, he'll be running a webinar, which is a bit broader, so will still tender relevant, of course, about the circular economy, a term you may have come across. It's about global challenges. It's things like, climate change, waste pollution, sustainability, recycling, all those good things, how to better manage resources. And you may think as a small business that you haven't got time for all that. But again, it's just about demonstrating you're doing something. You've got some sort of small steps in terms of how you are trying to be, call it what you like, environmentally friendly, green, plastic reduction. It'll all help you. And it'll also touch upon developing key partnerships, because as a small business owner, quite often you may see a tender and you think, we could do 60% of that, 70% of that. We can't do that other 30, 40%. So Tony, my colleague, will talk about how do you develop these key partnerships and then perhaps put in together a consortium bid. And that'll put you, again, in a much stronger position. And then finally, we've got our Meet the Buyer event, which is a live event, as it says. That's on the 14th of October, back at Tooting Works, where we had the launch event. And that's an opportunity for you to meet key people within the council and the private sector, larger organisation within the borough. Because like I said earlier, it's sometimes difficult to get hold of these senior people because they're all too busy. But if you've met someone face to face, that's much easier for you then to pick up the phone or send them an email and say, "Oh, we met at the Meet the Buyer event," and you've got the start of a relationship building. So do get yourselves registered for the webinars. They are at 11 o'clock, literally every week. This time, same place, same time. The link is there at the bottom, and we'll also be putting the recordings of these webinars up on a YouTube channel so you can review them, because I know I've given you quite a lot of information, so you can't necessarily take it all on go. You may want to review certain bits of it. I've touched upon the bid capability questionnaire, so again, the link is there for you to complete. It's a good thing to do because it gives you a benchmark in terms of where you are, and it shows you potentially where the gaps are in terms of your own bid and tendering process, and you can start, like I say, working on that in advance of actually submitting a bid or tender response. So the links are all there for you there. Talked about the Meet the Buyer event, and that's the details of it there. We should have a good turnout. We run these events for every council, every local authority where we run these sort of programs, and they are generally very successful because you can get to talk to people that, like I said, you wouldn't often perhaps be able to get hold of. You can sort of share ideas and thoughts with other potential businesses. They're great great events to getting you access to people that you might not ordinarily be able to get hold of, whether that's in the council or in the larger tier 1, tier 2 private sector buyers. And you can find out from them what drives them, what's key to their buying process, and then obviously you can adapt your own tender process on the back of that. So there's lots of good stuff to be had at those events. So we look forward to seeing you then. So I said at the start about things like evidence, and I mentioned that it's all well and good me saying this is a fantastic program, and it's similar to with your bidding and tendering. It's all well and good you saying you're a fantastic supplier, but it's much more powerful if one of your clients says that. So again, those of you who were at the event on last week, you'll have seen this. This is a quite tough business. It's a pallet business, but cut a long story short, they attended our program. They were looking to try and develop relationships with larger private sector organisations, and as part of the program, we signposted them to some key decision makers, and they're now working quite closely with Heathrow. So that's really quite a success story that we're very happy about. This business, it's a cleaning business, started very small. It's an amazing success story. It's gone from a very small startup to now a very significant medium-sized business with some very high-profile contracts. Logistically challenging. Sarah, who runs it, she's managing a team of 100 plus cleaners. But again, all helpful information received from the program. But the business has then gone away and done it, because it's all well and good me telling you about all these great things you can do. If you don't do it, you know what? It's not going to happen. And then finally, there's just a few quotes there from people who've attended the one-to-one sessions. Don't expect you to read all that, of course. We need to get rid of a few of those words. But the one-to-one sessions are very structured. They're very individual to you and your business. And like I said, they'll be coming as part of phase 2 of the project. So I think Q1 2024, hopefully, will be starting the one-to-one sessions. And typically, you'll have 1 or 2 sessions funded by the council. You can talk about your own business there in much greater detail. So hopefully that shows you that we know what we're talking about. And I say that not to be big-headed. I say that to demonstrate as an example that you should hopefully do the same with your business and make sure you've got some nice case studies and nice testimonials, people saying what a great job you've done, because it's just much more powerful when clients say it rather than you say it. It's your evidence. It's proving that you can do what you say because you've done it before, and these are the way you've added value and generated benefits. So important stuff. Okay, so we're just about on time, which is good for everyone. So get involved with the program and attend the schools webinars. Like I said, the links are all on Eventbrite. Please get yourself signed up for those, as many as you can. They will be useful. If for any reason you can't attend, because we know you're all super busy people, we will have recordings which will be shared with you on our YouTube channel. If you want to get involved with the Meet the Buyer events, of course, Gregory's your man. I'm sure you would have met Gregory, and he's the Economic Development Officer at Wandsworth Council. And we'll also, as I say, as part of the program, support you and show you ways to submit expressions of interest, and hopefully on the back of that, develop a winning bid. So I think that's just about it from me. That's end of part 1. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thanks for participating, because that always makes it more interesting for both, I hope, you and also for me to sort of understand, what are your issues. And I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes now, because we've still got sort of 3 or 4 minutes, I think, before 12. But I'll ask you to do a few things, if I may, before you dash off to your busy days. One is, I've mentioned at the start of the session that I want you to hopefully commit to do something, having listened to what I've said in the last hour. So if you're prepared to share it in the chat, please just write down what's that one action you're going to go away and do. It's not like a classroom. I can't check up on you, but if you're able to share, that would be great. Any feedback, good, bad, indifferent. I've been around long enough. I've got broad shoulders. If you think there's something I could have done better, happy to hear that. If you think there's something I did well, happy to hear that as well. And yeah, I'll stick around for a couple of minutes. If you've got any particular questions, I can try and answer them now. Alternatively, you'll have my details, and you can basically get hold of me, and we can have a one-to-one chat if that's helpful. So I'll just keep the link open for a couple of minutes. Thank you again. Any feedback and any sort of action commitments, thanks. People are putting stuff in already, so that's great. Thank you, Carla. Do some case studies. Yeah, make sure your policy. Yeah, that's brilliant, Kenneth. Get your policies in place. Yeah, Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Roderick. Thanks very much. I know these webinars can be a bit, repetitive. I try and keep them interactive. I try and keep them interesting. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, Roderick. Thank you for that. Oh, Julie, you've asked about should you use all the word count? That's a good question, because just to give people a background there, often with local authority tenders, you'll have a word count restriction for each section. So, for example, it will say 300 words maximum, 400 words maximum. My view on that, Julia, is you don't have to, if it's a 400 word count, you don't have to use 395 words. But I think if, for example, this is not rocket science, if you wrote 200 words on a 400 word count, you're probably missing something. So my view would be you should certainly be getting close to the word count, because hopefully that's giving you that opportunity to 2,925 questions. Wow, that's a lot of questions. On each question. Wow, that is a lot. That is a lot. Yeah, we probably haven't got time to talk about it individually now, Julia. But yeah, that is a lot of. That is a high. I've never seen a 2,000 word count. Great, Shun. Glad you enjoy that. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can mirror what you're doing here potentially with any borough. Yeah, pleasure, Julia. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully, we'll see you all same place, same time next week. I'm glad it's been useful. And like I said, you can use this anyway. Okay, yeah, okay, Ken, fair enough. I mean, yeah, the only thing I would say, absolutely use this with other councils, is that most councils have a strategy to try to give business to local businesses within their own boroughs as a first sort of priority, if you like. So if you're based in Watford, for argument's sake, and you're trying to break into a borough in London, then it's more likely that the borough in London, like Wandsworth, will give it to the Wandsworth businesses. But there's nothing to stop you making the contact, nothing to stop you basically developing those relationships, because there are always different angles that are worth looking at. Great stuff. Well, thank you, everyone. As I say, everyone's still on the call, but if you have any final observations, please do share them. Failing that, I will look forward to hopefully seeing you all again next week. Yep, there's a bit of stuff in the chat that people are sort of talking about. So yeah, do connect up individually as well if you can. That's all part of these events as well. It's like sharing your own challenges. It's always good to talk to other businesses, and whilst you're all competition in some shape or form, it's also good to just sort of share some expertise, some challenges, some best practice, because yeah, you'll always learn something as part of that process. Okay, so I'll leave it for another minute for any last questions, observations, feedback, and then I shall leave you to get on with your busy days. And thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all again, same time, same place next week. Okay, well, have a great day, everyone. If you have any other questions that you think about outside, you can send us an email at the Brandon email address there, and then you can get hold of me as well through Gregory, no problem at all. Probably worth addressing things to Gregory in the first instance, but I'm very happy to. In fact, I should put my email in the chat. So how's that? One second. Right, that's my email address. So if anyone wants to get in touch, then absolutely happy to sort of have a quick chat. Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. I'll be shutting down the screen now, and look forward to seeing you all, hopefully, same time, same place next week. Thanks a lot. All the best.